Today's webinar is entitled, What Will Happen When I'm Gone? Ensuring Knowledge Transfer to Your Successor, presented by Paula Singer and Gail Griffith. Paula Singer is owner and president of the Singer Group, a management consulting firm she founded in 1983. Her individualized approach and commitment to excellence have resulted in a track record of success with an impressive client list. With expertise in compensation, organization development, strategic planning, and change management, Paula brings a balance of broad perspective and specific focus to each project. Gail Griffith has enjoyed a 35-year career in public libraries, with over 25 years as a public library administrator in Maryland, responsible for public services, organization development, and human resources. Since 1992, she's consulted with libraries around the country on strategic planning and organization design projects, often with the Singer Group. I am now happy to introduce Paula and Gail.
Hi, I'm Paula and Gail.
And I'm Gail.
And I'm seeing a couple notes about the sound being mumbled. Is this a little better? Lori, Catherine? I'm hoping this is a little bit better. And if not, please write in and we'll see what what Eileen and Chuck can do. Okay, a little. That's a good start. I guess sound is fine now with different speakers, so maybe it was on their end. So today we're going to talk about knowledge transfer, what is going to happen when you leave or we leave, and just trying to ensure that as we go, new people can take over and be ready to go. Gail and I started thinking about this topic as part of planning for retirement, the topic of our webinar last week, and I hope a number of you were able to join us then. Certainly this topic is related to planning for retirement. It's also related to succession planning. And we soon realized that it's much bigger than that. People with unique skills and organizational perspectives leave jobs for any number of reasons at any time. Whenever a leader or someone with unique skills leaves, the organization loses what they know. And oftentimes that can be a very significant loss to the library. Sometimes what's lost is the person's unique skills and abilities. Someone has to spend time getting up to speed on how to do the job. Sometimes it's about relationships in the community, the local school principals, your media contacts, businesses, and moms who see you every week at story time. Sometimes what's lost is the person's organizational knowledge, knowing why key decisions were made and how to do things most effectively. A lack of this kind of informal knowledge often results in a lot of trial and error, and sometimes it means the wheel needs to be reinvented yet again. Fortunately, there are other ways that are organizations that we can help make these transitions smoother, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So this topic's very important, obviously, many people leaving. We're going to be talking about explicit information, the formal knowledge in the organization, implicit information, the informal or tacit knowledge that you can't always put your finger on, but is really important to be transmitted, how organizations capture and share knowledge, and what are some of the ways that individuals share what they know, and what can you do about it back at your library after this webinar is over. So we're going to give you some tips for transferring knowledge. So first, let's do a poll. Who's in our virtual living room here? Are you a library director, a supervisor, frontline staff, a student, or anybody else? Let's do that poll.
Okay, and I see the answers coming in.
Okay, I'm not, so you can tell us.
Okay. So far, I'm seeing that more than a quarter of the folks here are library directors and about an equal number of supervisors. About 10% are frontline staff, and the rest are a mix. So we've got a really nice mix of folks here. That's
Do you have any students, Gail? I love students.
Actually, there is one person who's identified as a student. So
great, thank you for joining us. Yeah. So that's in our room, and now we're going to do a little poll. Tell us more about what's happening in your library, and check all that apply for you. Are you planning to retire within 5 years? Do you work with someone who's planning to retire soon? And or has your library been downsized recently and feeling the loss of the knowledge and skills and experience that people have taken with them?
Okay, so Chuck, I'm having a little trouble getting this poll slide to open.
Have you closed the first one yet?
Okay. Thank you very much.
Always something, isn't it?
Always something. It's going to take a few more seconds for that to happen.
And then just click on the poll too there when it closes.
Okay, I'll do that. So I should be really good for poll 3.
Yeah, and Gail, you know what? You really ought to transfer this knowledge to me someday.
Okay,
very good
the second one is up. Second one is up.
Okay, so click A, B, and or C. You can pick more than one.
And it's great. We have a lot of folks responding. Just about everyone is finished, and it looks like just about half of the people here are planning to retire within 5 years, and about 45% are working with someone who's planning to retire soon, and 35% come from a library that has downsized and has felt the loss of staff. So that's really a lot.
So everybody's got a little bit of pain here.
Yeah.
And that's why this topic is so important.
Right.
Gail, why don't you go to the next?
I am trying to do that, and it won't change until I close the poll, and I still have 2 seconds.
Oh, in the meantime, why don't you
there.
Okay, forget the meantime for now. So if a person had a memory like the average organization, we would think he was very stupid or suffering from some kind of a neurological disorder. Organizations routinely, quote, forget what they've done in the past and why they have done it. And I'm sure so many of you know how true that is. It's hard enough to make sure that everyone in an organization knows what they need to know on a regular basis, and that's without anybody leaving. Over the past decade or so, we've seen libraries working very hard to become learning organizations so that we can all be more agile and can learn from our experience. The most effective libraries are always looking for ways for staff members to share what they know. Still, the average library, actually the average any organization, isn't very good at it. Studies have shown that the average knowledge worker spends from 15 to 35% of his or her time just finding information. And that's before, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that's just the information they need to know in order to do the job.
Right. So that's pretty amazing. So look at these book titles. This is absolutely amazing. How to Disappear and Never Be Found, How to Be Invisible, How to Be Invisible, How to Disappear. And these are real books. These are real titles of books. Now imagine the people you rely on for specialized knowledge, library knowledge, or wisdom, leaving your library without a trace. How long would it take you to recover? This, by the way, might be a popular fantasy. We had no idea how popular till we saw so many books on Amazon. And not all these books about disappearing and being invisible are fiction. Some are true. So if you were spending 15% of your time finding information before these key people left, imagine how long you'd be spending once they vanished. And they will go. The baby boomers are beginning to retire. About 45% of current librarians will reach 65 in this decade, and ALA's most current research indicates that retirements will peak in the period between 2015 and 2019. Many of us will take 30 years or more of experience and knowledge with us. And yes, that is us, as we can even see from the polls. We are the baby boomers, and 2015 is not very far away at all. And please keep in mind, we're not only talking about those of us in leadership positions. Oftentimes people think about knowledge transfer, succession planning as being those in leadership, but that's not what we're talking about at all. The critical positions for which knowledge transfer is particularly important could be anyone who has knowledge that might be lost when the holder of this position leaves. It could be your government documents librarian, early literacy specialist, account payable manager, or anyone in a myriad of critical or specialty positions. Let's do another quick poll. How confident are you that your library will be able to capture the important pieces of organizational knowledge and memory that you and your colleagues possess before you and it all walk out the door with you. So let us know, are you very confident, somewhat confident, or not at all confident?
So the answers are coming in, and nearly everyone has responded.
And what did they say?
And actually, about a quarter of us are not at all confident, and about half of us are somewhat confident. Only about 7 or 8% are very confident at this point. So interesting to know.
Good, because we're going to be asking you soon about some of your tips for knowledge transfer. So those of you that are somewhat and very confident, we're going to ask you to share that with us shortly. Gail, you want to talk about the age of the knowledge worker now?
Sure. We are now in what Peter Drucker called the age of the knowledge worker. We are creating, locating, using information and knowledge. Most of us are doing that kind of knowledge work. And from Peter Drucker's point of view, and we happen to agree, it means we're all responsible for making sure that knowledge transfer happens. Chances are that your library is doing some things to help, and that it's also relying on you. So let's talk about the different kinds of knowledge that need to be transferred. Explicit knowledge is the easiest to share. That's formal organizational knowledge. It includes the specialized skills that are needed for a variety of jobs, especially for those with complex or unique tasks. It also includes policies and procedures. This kind of knowledge is in the foreground. It's the first thing you think of when you think about training someone to do the job.
So an example might be the policies of the job, or?
Library policies. It's intellectual freedom policy, for example.
Good, good. Thanks.
Okay? Yeah. So it's really important to be selective when you're determining what explicit knowledge and skills you want to transfer to your successor. So often we think about showing someone how to do something the way it's always been done, or how to do something the way we're most comfortable doing it. But in reality, your successor doesn't need to hear everything from you. Instead, think about these 3 things. First, what do you know that is critical for the work, the product, or the organization to move forward? Again, you don't need to share everything you know about the topic. In fact, you might have a hard time dredging up everything you know, but some of us would want to try anyway. Anytime you've ever heard from someone, oh, we have a long and proud history of doing this in this way. We were doing it this way back in the 60s when I came here, and we're still doing it, and we'll probably always do it this way. That's too much, okay? The second thing to remember is, what do you know that's relevant for the future? Not the entire history of a department or a team or a partnership, just what's meaningful for today and for tomorrow. And third, what do you know that is unique, that few others or that no one else knows? The usual approach to transferring this kind of information is to preserve documents. But that's something we really need to be aware of, because a whole room full of documents that aren't contextualized in any way and aren't searchable is totally useless. Less really is more here. If you haven't used a certain file in 10 years, it's probably not going to be very useful to your successor either. In fact, I remember—
That's a really good point, Gail.
Yeah.
How many file drawers of paper I have that I know no one's ever going to look at.
Absolutely. You know, I remember doing a thorough weeding of paper files in my office after I'd been on the job for about 10 years. And the reason I did that was because our offices were moving and we didn't want to pack anything we didn't need to take with us. And at that point, 2 things struck me. First, how many things that my predecessor kept, even those things from the person who preceded her. And second, how few of those files I had ever felt the need to consult. So I was able to weed a lot. If your digital desktop or hard drive is cluttered with files you haven't weeded or organized, the very same thing holds true. It's just easier to ignore the digital files if you're the new person coming in. There's certainly a law of diminishing returns. The more work you have to put into developing a tool like a procedure manual, the less likely it will happen. So instead of collecting things, try enhancing the tools you already use. And those tools might be very personal to you and your style. If you keep a tickler file, for example, to remind you that something is due, put an example of it in the file. If you do a complicated statistical report that you send in to the state or some other place every February, put the current one and your work papers with the notes you use to remind you where that data came from into that file. You might consider developing a calendar or a list of groups you meet with regularly, along with a note about what your role with those groups has been, not necessarily needs to be, right?
Yeah.
Again, a list of those critical tasks or projects and who else in the organization might be helpful to you in getting those done, if in fact there are other people who know.
That's good. That's really good ideas, Gail. You know, talking about not using paper, it makes me think about the evolution of a policy and procedures manual. One of our clients, a regional library in Maryland, put their whole tech services policy and procedure manual on a wiki on their intranet. And it lists not only the policies and procedures, which was fine, but they also put in the reason for it as well. So new people could come in and see not only what it is, but why it is, and then if that why changed, it could be easily altered, not just, oh, we've always done it this way, but they knew where it came from. And being on a wiki on their intranet, it never had to have papers replaced or, you know, changes and Xeroxed and copied and handed out. Just a very easy tool to follow and update regularly.
Right, and actually in that particular case, one of the great things was that wiki was available to folks beyond the staff of that regional library.
Right.
Any of their constituent libraries could access it. So anytime somebody had a question about why something was done the way it was, they could see. Yeah.
And that's a whole new thing too, isn't it? Just these last, 10 years or so, people saying the why. Why
yes.
a decision is made, and transmitting that knowledge is really critical as well, not just the decision. People want and need the understanding of it as well.
That's right. So here are a couple of things to think about as you're deciding what kind of explicit information to pass along. There's a terrific short online article from American Libraries that we've put in our resource handout. It's called Wait, You Can't Retire Without Sharing That With Us. And it's about knowledge transfer practices at the Toledo-Lucas County Public Library in Ohio. And one of the examples that we wanted to share with you was their collection snapshots. They took a look at where their organization would be vulnerable if some of their collection managers left. They have librarians who are responsible for maintaining very specialized collections. So each year, each of these librarians produces a collection snapshot that outlines the goals for that collection and their progress toward meeting those goals so that anyone else could understand what's happening in that collection. We have another example. One of our colleagues was the only one on her staff who handled a long-standing but kind of infrequently used tuition remission agreement with a local college. Now, she retired and did pass along some information about that to her successor, but the college's key staff member retired at the same time, and it was really very hard for both sides to figure out what to do, to the point where the agreement might have come to an end, and that would be sad. The key, again, is not to do too little or too much, but to focus on what's critical. Accept and embrace, if you can, that your successor is going to want to do things differently. They won't care about everything you ever did and the reasons for it. They're going to come already with some skills, and they're going to have their own style. So they'll choose to work in a way that is different from yours, and that's how it should be. So your question should be, what will they need to know in order to be successful, regardless of their style? So if you could use the chat to tell us one kind of explicit or task knowledge that you would want to share with your successor. What would they need to know how to do that no one else would be able to tell them about in any detail?
Yeah, tell us some things that you're experiencing, and especially those of you who know somebody retiring or yourselves. What are you thinking of?
And I see someone has put in the chat, there is no sound. I'm hoping that's not a widespread problem. And hoping to see the first item in the chat box to tell us. There we go. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Close, yeah.
Dealing with certain vendors, committee efforts at the state level.
Spanish speaking, yeah. Oh, how to manage your website. That's a tough one.
Oh, how to manage those written requests for proposals for county purchasing. Very important.
Annual report to the board. Oh, yeah, and that's something that only happens once a year. Ha, ha, ha.
Okay, well, so there are a lot of things that you all know that other people would need to know and you'd need to plan for.
I think working with the board and working with budgets, I mean, both of those are
generally
right.
Yeah, and often only a few people in the organization have that knowledge.
Yes, and that is definitely explicit knowledge, but it's also very contextual and implicit knowledge in both of those.
Yes.
And passing that along is going to be critical for all of us.
Right. So I see lots of great examples there in the chat. Lots of great examples.
Right, and you know, writing the summer reading evaluation for the system, that is so important and only happens once a year. And there's a lot of the what that goes into making the final document with the outputs that it is, and passing that along is going to be important.
That's right.
Thank you all for sharing that.
Definitely. And Paula, you already mentioned that a lot of these things are a combination of explicit and implicit knowledge, but we want to talk more specifically for a little bit about implicit or tacit knowledge. Implicit knowledge is that knowledge that is not written down anywhere. It's a lot harder to transfer, and it's potentially more important. Oh, if only we could use the Vulcan mind meld to accomplish this. And yes, if this picture looks familiar to you, you are old enough to be thinking about transferring your knowledge to a successor. There's a lot of implicit knowledge embedded in experience, stories, impressions, creative solutions. People sometimes don't even know how to verbalize what they know. Getting people to talk about why we did something this way, or what would happen if we stopped doing a certain thing, or hasn't this problem been solved before? Did anyone consider trying this approach? Or what did we learn the last time this happened? And note that every single one of these questions is different from, we tried it that way 25 years ago and it didn't work, so we're not trying that again. Okay, that is not what we're getting at, right?
We do hear that every now and again, though, don't we, Gail?
Yeah, every now and then. The other big piece of informal or implicit knowledge has to do with relationships that help get work done. Who do you go to for certain kinds of help? Who are our strongest community partners? Who has proven to be very trustworthy? And is there anybody who I might want to get to know just a little better before I trust them with a certain kind of information? Lots of questions. Now, there are some effective ways to share this kind of knowledge, and chances are that some of these things are already happening in your organization, whether or not you think of them as knowledge transfer tools. Collaboration or teamwork is great at helping to preserve organizational memory, at least for the team that worked together on the project.
Yeah, you know, Gail, that's one of the reasons why I love teams that are cross-departmental or diagonal slices of the organization, people at different levels, different departments, because that really helps spread that knowledge throughout, doesn't it?
That's right, and particularly if you are bringing people who are newer to the organization on board some of these teams, you're really going to get a lot of knowledge transferred pretty quickly, that kind of vertical slice. Job shadowing can be very useful, but only if it's done long enough to convey not just the technical aspects of the job, but also your methods for diagnosing and solving problems. It's really hard to do this with your successor unless you're hiring from within and the decision is made early enough for this to happen. But it is possible.
Yeah, definitely if possible. But, you know, having said that, I think shadowing also helps build transfer of culture and transfer of knowledge in the organization, even if the person or people, and I love it when it's multiple people doing the shadowing, aren't the successor to that person, because it's still transmitting knowledge and culture and values and history to others in the organization who can also help and support the people who, the person or people who are the successors.
Totally agree.
And
totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead with storytelling. Then Catherine raises a question that I want us to come back to also.
Okay. Well, storytelling is a really powerful medium for transferring implicit knowledge, and we're doing it all the time, whether you're conscious of it or not. The best stories that are used intentionally for transmitting positive aspects of culture or critical aspects include a plot, some major characters, an outcome, and an implied moral.
Oh, so a real story.
Yeah, a real story. Yeah. Stories give you the context of the corporate values and the ethics and all the important relationships. I worked in an organization where one of the customer service legends was an interlibrary loan librarian who got a desperate call from a customer on a Friday afternoon near closing, needing something that she was hoping was in the delivery for her because she needed it on Saturday for some kind of workshop she was doing, and she couldn't get to the library to pick it up. And this ILL librarian opened a FedEx account and had it delivered to her.
Wow.
And did not get punished.
That was
which, you know,
Gail.
So that really opened up a whole lot of conversations about customer service, and that story got told for quite a while. Another story that made an impression on me, a colleague of mine was a circulation manager at a large suburban library system, and once in a purge of items that hadn't circulated in a while, she managed to delete the library system's reference collection and then had to go own up to it and thought she would be fired, but of course she wasn't. She had to figure out how to solve the problem, and that story got told for a long time and transmitted a lot of information about making mistakes, owning up to them, looking for solutions, all sorts of things. So storytelling is very powerful. Remember, you already exchange organizational stories at your library. So make sure the stories you are telling focus on a core cultural value that you want to nurture.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. You know, Catherine asked, are there effective ways to kindly get this information from someone before they retire? And these are definitely some of the ways, and we're going to ask you to chat about some examples in a minute. But I want to say that one of the really best ways and most flattering ways is to just ask them and talk about the skills that they bring to the job, their knowledge, and what experiences were beneficial to them. Ask them what they were most proud of, what they accomplished, and how they did it. So those are some things to think about. Brenda says that the new person must be open and recognize they don't know everything. How true is that?
Yeah, it's true for everyone, actually.
Yeah. New person, and going back to what Gail said before, the successor or the new person is definitely going to want to do and should do certain things differently. And yet it's important also to see what has been done and what they kind of learn from what's being done already, so that that wheel doesn't have to be reinvented over and over again. Because some of it's not about style. Some of it's just about, you know, knowing the policy or knowing how the system works or knowing how to write that RFP in line with county purchasing rules. You don't want too much creativity there because it won't go through.
Right.
And,
so I see people are starting to respond to our chat question, and I think that's great. People are starting to talk about how they transfer implicit information, but we're interested in knowing one kind of implicit or contextual piece of knowledge that you think your successor would find useful. And someone mentioned a relationship with the head of IT. I think being able to transmit information about relationships with all kinds of people who help you get the job done is really important. You know, what's important to them. Who really makes the decisions in the organization? You bet.
Where are those informal leaders? Who are they? And how can you work most effectively with them? Yeah. Relationship with union. Christina figures, says, in the history of working together in partnership.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's great.
The fact that there is a positive history is something you do want the new person coming in to know about, and not just assume that it's a bad relationship, which, by the way, happens if that person came from a library system that did have a bad relationship.
Right.
You don't want to carry that assumption through.
Right.
Oh, how to read in between the lines. Oh, what is she really saying? I would like to know how you're going to share that knowledge, and that's really important. And you know what? One way I'd say to share that knowledge would be to tell stories, going back to what Gail said about storytelling. There you're not just stating the facts as you see them or putting out your assumptions. You can say, this is what happened and this is what the outcome was.
Right.
So you can get it through a little more with context rather than directly, which people might not be as open to hearing. Where the history of the library files are, where the bodies are buried.
That's what all the new people want to know.
Every library has them. Lori mentioned, and Lori, by the way, you just sent that to me privately. I don't think you wanted to do that, but it's fine. Lori mentioned building relationships with vendors and pricing and discounts. Yeah, you know, I was working with the system, and a new person came in, and they didn't know that huge discounts had already been negotiated and was starting from scratch, which was total waste. If they would have known that the baseline was 30% off of everything, they could have gone from there and not going back and just asking for 10% off. So those are really good points. Yeah, where the bodies are buried is really important too. Some other things that were done, actually when I was working with Gail's library many years ago, was in order to be a librarian too, the librarian ones needed to get supervisory experience. But there was no way for them to get it because they were librarian ones. So what they did in their system, in a very creative way, was to move the supervision of the pages to the librarian ones, and that helped them get the experience. So if you make a change, you'll want to think about helping the group get experience in another way, which they couldn't have ever become a librarian too without it.
I'm hearing some echoing.
Yeah, I am too. Chuck? Oh, is it okay now? No.
I'm not sure where it's coming from.
Okay.
Okay. So, let me just try. I'll switch phones. I've got another one right here, and see if that does it.
I'm not hearing an echo from you now.
Is that okay now?
Yes, I think so.
Yes, I guess so. Okay, good. So another time was another system where Mary Jo from the school system needing to talk to her because she's the person who can best figure out the politics of Citywide Early Childhood Committee. And if Mary Jo had left before you had a chance to talk to her, or a successor had a chance to talk to her, it would be really hard to figure out what was really going on under the table in those meetings. So some of the best practices here, which I know you're doing anyway, are, even though they're not specific to knowledge transfer, they really help. And some tools are useful for transferring explicit information, some help with implicit information, and some may and oftentimes do both. So performance reviews, every manager should be doing them and supported by the HR department. And they are, in fact, capturing key skills with these performance reviews, whether or not it's a conscious practice. I mean, I'm sure many of us don't go into performance reviews saying, oh, here we are to help capture knowledge, but yet it's being done. And asking employees what they've done this year, what they're most proud of, what they want to do in the upcoming year, and how the managers can help them, that really helps to reveal the employee's greatest skills and where they are the most expert, which of course serves to help the new person coming in. And mentoring programs, training senior managers in mentoring roles, matching them with mentoring for several months is a great developmental tool and certainly helps to transfer knowledge. Of course, remember not to promise promotion because that's not what it's about. It's about mentoring and sharing knowledge and helping that next generation of people coming in. And mentoring programs can be very critical and helpful to developing that next generation, regardless of whether the person wants to go into the job that the mentor has or not, just for learning more about the culture of the organization. And teams, when Gail and I look at teams, we love to see a combination of experienced and brand new staff. And we have seen so many newer staff and younger staff just rise to the clouds by given the opportunity to learn from and share their thoughts along with the others. We like to see many task teams because it also helps flatten out decision-making and spreads the knowledge around. Any way that you can introduce collaboration is good. It helps break down silos and encourages people to share both explicit and implicit information. And, you know, it doesn't stop there. It also helps building networks, building community, building support and trust throughout the organization. Gail and I seem to be in love with wikis these days, wiki, especially wiki on the internet, because it's so easy. It is such an easy way to put formal knowledge, such as policies and procedures, in one central place that everybody has access to it. And people can comment on it, ask questions, get responses, and it can be updated in 10 seconds. And, you know, that's really a great way to pass down knowledge. Staff meetings, using them for problem solving. Lots of staff meetings are just the director or the manager going, meh, 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 meh. But when people are actually involved in problem solving and get to talk about the reasons why a course of action was chosen, that's really critical. We've also seen action learning teams very, very effective with a diagonal slice of the organization also, and not having senior level people in them at all, just, well, I don't want to say just, but more junior level people with support but figuring out for themselves, and the senior people only being a resource. So they are learning how things are done, and they're also making some changes to it. Exit interviews are on this list as a best practice, but they can only capture certain things, certainly not a lifetime of experience. They are better as a reality check, not as a starting point. I see that Catherine started up a staff wiki, and they're still using it 4 years later. Yeah, I think you have a good point there, Catherine, about making people, or certainly encouraging them, to log on and participate, because, you know, once they participate, then they own it, and they're more likely to keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So other best practices are to identify subject matter experts, called SMEs in the organization development literature.
Yes, and indeed.
SMEs. And find out those who have strategic jobs or special situational or historical knowledge, and develop an individualized plan for knowledge transfer to potential successors. And you can identify who these subject matter experts are by asking, who do the others go to in a crisis? And this might be an informal leader who never shows up on an org chart. It could be a department administrative assistant who knows where everything is or where the bodies are buried. But who do people go in a crisis? Who has long-term organizational memory? Who's been around and involved? So it wouldn't just be somebody who's been around for a long time, but who's got the memory, who's got the history, who knows where those bodies are buried?
You know, I'm sorry, but you know, Paula, I got an email from a former coworker last week who I haven't worked with in over 3 years, who said, I'm just checking to see if you remember whether this is what we did and why we did it. So, you know, that kind of knowledge transfer can happen even after the person has left, if you know where to find them.
If you know where to find them. And, you know, that's an important point, too, Gail. Just because they're gone doesn't mean they're gone forever. People have connections in history. Feel free to pick up the phone. Mm-hmm. So other subject matter experts would be the who's doing a one-of-a-kind job. Like I mentioned earlier, the government documents librarian, the head of emergent literacy, and so forth. Who has unique skills and knowledge, and who carries the ball on major problems? And, oh, come on, we all know that there are a handful of people in your organization who carry the ball on many, many of those projects. And these are people you really want to talk with, spend some time with, and develop an individualized plan for how they're going to transfer that knowledge. Some organizations are being really proactive and clear with it. Some are asking people to come back and coach employees, mentor employees, consult to employees. And Montgomery County government in Maryland actually has put together knowledge transfer contracts. And these began in 2009 when they started seeing baby boomers retiring. And while they were expecting and hoping that the department heads would have a comprehensive succession plan in place for all key positions, they found, lo and behold, that some were retiring without sufficient notice to make this happen. They were too busy, they didn't give notice. They also had, I believe, an early retirement plan initially, and some people left too quickly. So in order to maintain the systematic delivery of services, the county put in place a method for planning for knowledge transfer post-retirement. So they didn't have enough time before, so they did it after. And under this scenario, knowledge transfer contracts for up to 720 hours for a 12-month period were allowed. But the county was smart about it, and they didn't just let anybody do it. They needed to have justification, and they needed to answer the questions of what knowledge is intended to be shared, with whom would it be shared, how would it be shared, and in justifying it, they needed to include the deliverable, the process, and any templates that would be used. They also needed to answer why was it essential that the knowledge be shared. So there really needed to be some thoughts and reflection around what was it going to buy the county and the department, and what is the consequence of not bringing back the employee on a temporary basis. So clearly in this situation it was not their first choice, but they knew they wanted to transfer knowledge in a way that would be beneficial for the organization.
Looking at the way that some organizations set up knowledge transfer, we found a really interesting project that Shell Oil put together. Now, they're a multinational organization, so both its size and its need for knowledge transfer are larger than any library we can think of. But they knew right away that because they were so large and they were going to make video interviews with retiring employees to kind of capture this information, they were going to have to index the video interviews to make them useful. And that actually is a good thing to remember no matter what kind of information you want to collect and pass along or in what format. It's indexing and contextualizing, because nobody wants to sit through 5 hours of video in the hopes that they'll find the 3 minutes that are critical to them.
Yeah.
We did find a library example, and it is more of a one-off. And that is Vancouver, British Columbia Public Library's retiring city librarian, Paul Whitney. He was retiring, and the staff interviewed him on video about his experiences, about the changes he had seen both in libraries in general and in this particular library, and about his vision of the future. And the video interview is broken down into 3 5-minute pieces, and it's posted on YouTube. Those videos are on our resource list. Every video has several segments, and the interview is labeled with the topics, so it makes them fairly easy to access. It was a good way to help celebrate Whitney's retirement, and we wanted to show you about 1 minute and 37 seconds of one of these videos. There we go.
Oh, it's going to work.
There we go. Okay, are we back? Okay. I hope that you were able to see or to hear that video a little better than I was. But if you had some trouble with the sound, you can go back to the videos on the resource list and have a look if you're at all interested in this technique. Just think about the knowledge and information his successor would have about the way he led the library without ever having met him. So it's an interesting technique to use.
And so easy nowadays.
Yeah.
A cell phone, a flip cam, yeah.
Right. So take a moment and tell us in the chat box what is already going on in your organization that supports the transfer of knowledge. If you can think of something.
I love the art.
Lego. Oral histories. Yes, that's really, very similar to what they were doing there with Paul Whitney.
Yeah.
Manuals, meetings, cross-bureau working groups, just as we were talking about. That kind of
policies and procedure manuals. I hope they're on the internet, not paper and not computer.
Right. Oh,
Fireside
involving,
chats.
yeah. I like that, involving more people in budget preparation so they get to see it.
Because that's probably one of the hardest things senior managers do.
Mm-hmm.
Legacy Livermore, mentoring, job shadowing, year-long workshops.
Oh.
Gary, we'd love to hear about that if you're willing to share a web thing that people can access it.
Mm-hmm.
Folks come back for a set period to train, coach their successor. So, Paula, that's like the Montgomery County program.
Mm-hmm.
Shadowing.
I love that. Understand the why and how of the jobs and decision making. That gets both kinds of knowledge.
Mhm. Dismantling. Oh, because laying off or not filling jobs.
Oh, that's interesting. Having new employees update the procedure manuals and getting feedback from existing. If you understand it well enough to explain it, you've learned it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gary.
Yeah. Okay.
So things are happening, and
right.
That's what, Gail, you've been saying. Libraries are doing it anyway. Not calling it that, but doing it.
But doing it, yeah.
Doing it.
Yeah. So if your organization is not doing enough of these things to satisfy you, think about what one person can do. I'm only one person. What can I do? Well, you know, first is to recognize that the leadership change that's coming is an opportunity to revitalize things. If we're the ones who are leaving, we need to let our successor form his or her own new relationships. And at the same time, we need to alert them to any landmines that we know of, such as a performance problem that's being documented, while keeping our own biases out of it. And that's really hard to do. We acknowledge that. Focus on the information that's going to inform future decisions, not this is how it's always been done and should always be done, but instead, this is why this decision was made in this place and at this time. You can develop your own plan, and we do have a handout to help you do that. To do that, you need to ask a number of questions. What knowledge do you intend to share? Where will significant loss of knowledge and skills occur? Who needs to know? With whom will you share? How will it be shared and how documented? Why is it essential to share this particular knowledge? And most of all, what will the consequence be of not sharing it? And if it's not you, but your coworker or your boss who is planning to leave, ask them how you can help them transfer the key knowledge that they have.
You know, a good point, Gail, that you just said is the why is it essential and what the consequences are.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about that might motivate us to actually do something about it.
That's right. If you are the one who's leaving and you know who your successor is going to be, or you're collecting data for a successor you haven't met yet, think about including others, not just your successor. If they're not already acquainted, introduce your staff to your key contacts in the community. You could designate one person to meet your contacts and make sure they're later introduced to your successor. And there's also value in splitting these up among several staff so that more people recognize your staff and vice versa. At your staff meetings, tell stories about those organizational values that have to do with the people there, and ask them to share their stories too. You know, remember that time we had that big challenge to the collection and the board stood firm despite a lot of criticism? That's when we understood how important board support is and how meaningful it was to them when we thanked them. That kind of story. And yeah, you might also think about putting up a timeline, just some chart paper in the hall even, you know, and leave it up for a while. Draw a timeline of significant events from the library's history. Make sure each person's hire date is included, along with some library milestones, and even your successor's start date. Ask the staff, to show it to your successor. Make sure there's plenty of room in the future there. Have them use it with your successor as a way to celebrate their taking a place in the library's history. You can probably think of lots of other ways to do this. Have some fun with it. Use your imagination. Help people articulate and share all that implicit knowledge that they have. So for you, our last question is, what's the most powerful next step you can take to ensure that what you know stays? And you can, somebody did ask, can you publish a list of those questions you just listed? Yes, it's in the handout called Developing Your Plan. All of those questions are there.
And that link is in the chat, and I'm sure Eileen can put it up again if that's helpful.
Right. So we'd like to know if you have an idea about what you can do, what you can go back and do to make sure that what you know stays.
Yeah, anything get triggered for you? Some people have no sense. Using the internet.
Okay.
That's important. It's such a great resource, but only if people use it and there's important things on it for them.
Right.
Thanks for putting up the handouts. That's a good idea with the strategic plan.
Right.
Oh, Gary just mentioned a binder of cross-training. I think this is appropriate to say, but Gail and I did an InfoPeople webinar on cross-training a number of months ago. I have no idea how many months ago.
I'm sure it's still archived, though.
But I'm sure it's still archived, and you might want to take a look at that because there's some different kind of ideas there as well.
Right.
Yeah, if you don't already have something, starting somewhere. Putting it in your mind, now that it's in your mind, I bet you'll be doing something soon.
So we have, I think, 1 minute left. Although we're willing to hang around for any questions. I still see some great ideas coming up.
Yeah. Searchable computer files, yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, Gail, I don't know if you saw in the Q&A, there is one there from Catherine. Are there effective ways of kindly getting the information to someone pending their retirement?
Kindly. Yeah, flatter them.
Right, sit down with them and ask them about those things that are important.
They are going to be so flattered that you think it's what they know is important and that you want to learn from them or that people want to learn from them. I don't think it'll be a problem. I don't usually find people resenting it. Do you, Gail?
Oh, not at all. Almost everyone I've ever met wants to share what they know. We are in the information business, after all.
And people are often so pleased because they don't usually get asked.
Right. Exactly. Well, we want to thank you all for staying around till a minute past the hour, and we're willing to hang around a little longer. We know that a lot of you have to go, but there are a couple of handouts, and the link has been posted.
We appreciate your time. We hope this was helpful, and we're sorry about the little sound problems. I'm sure they'll be corrected in the future.
Yeah. So thank you, and we wish you the best as you are working to make sure that people know what they need to know.
And happy holidays.
Yes, absolutely.